The reason we run this panel is that we want you all to have a chance, students, to have a chance to interact with people who haven't been out of college as long, as some of our other panelists that have been out, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever, um, to, to give you a sense of what it's really like to enter the world of politics and how to navigate that. So my plan is a few announcements. I will then moderate the panel for probably 35 or 40 minutes. I do want to reserve the last 15 minutes or so for questions from you all. And I can tell you, as I know each of these panelists very well, three of which were my former students, that they're all very accessible in terms of conversation, and they're here to help. So that's what the theme of tonight is. So thank you all for being here. In terms of announcements, for the traditional 395 students and my DC students, if there are any of those from DC, and I think I saw a couple, just remember your outline and annotated bibliography is due this Friday. You're going to upload it on Blackboard by 5 p.m. And please, please, please make sure to upload it as a Word doc so I can give you feedback on that with regard to the outline and annotated bibliography. For everybody, which includes the research students, we have our second political event write-up is due by the end of the semester, which sounds like a lifetime away, but it's actually only April 30th, right? And it's almost the 1st. So just be aware you need to make sure that you get that second political write-up in by then. And I am very well aware that many of you have not gotten your first write-up back, and I'll be getting that to you shortly. I apologize. I meant to get that done this weekend, but I wasn't able to. And let's see. The last thing I would just say to the students is make sure you're managing your hours, you're keeping your timesheet up to date, because we want to make sure we hit the minimum number of hours required for your unit count. All right. With all that said, let me go ahead and turn over the panel. And the first person I'd like to introduce is Natalie Alvarez. Natalie has been on this panel, I don't know how many times, to be totally honest. It is a true pleasure. She's the director of Gen Next. Gen Next, I'm going to read this so I'm accurate, is an invite-only organization that helps its members become better leaders on critical generational issues involving economic opportunities, education, a whole host of different areas. It's a very unique organization, and so I think allowing the students to hear insight, not just to Gen Next, but what sort of your entire history has been, will be wonderful. Number two, Daniel Lopez. Daniel, I have a question. I've got two different positions. I know you're a consultant at DTM Strategies. Are you also working for Redistricting Partners?
Yep, that's mostly what I'm focusing on right now.
Okay. So project manager at Redistricting Partners, but also doing some consulting at DTM Strategies. So obviously keeping very busy, and as you'll hear, he's had his foot in the world of politics, local politics, and even national politics for quite a while now. Danya Rafiqi, campaign manager for Representative Colin Allred, Democrat from Texas. So we'll be able to hear what it's like, working at that level. And she's actually also worked in a number of different areas. And Danya, I'm aware that you have to leave us at 5 o'clock for another commitment. So thank you for giving us your time. I appreciate it. And then last but not least, Maddie Rusnak, senior press secretary for the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Other words, HELP. I like the acronym. That's actually pretty good. And of course, you have a significant background prior to that as well. So Natalie, why don't we start off with you? And we're going to go person by person in terms of background, and then I have some very pointed questions that we can start to jump into. But talk a little bit, if you would, just about your background, what your strategy was coming out of college to find a job, and how you landed at Gen Next and how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, I'm going to make it very short too in the interest of time. And by the way, hello, it's lovely to see those of you who are on camera. So I feel like I can interact with you guys a little bit. So I went to school for communications and public relations, and I was that kid when I was 7 or 8 years old that would watch the news by myself and march off to school. And by 12, I was reading the LA Times and always had this fascination with understanding what the world was around me, and really wanting to have a role in current events, but not knowing quite what that meant or how that could translate. I loved communications because I loved storytelling. And shortly after getting out of college, my very first job, I was employed at a PR agency that did earned media for, at this time, it was the Jonas Brothers, like the first time that they were popular before they came back with their great music. And I just realized that I didn't want to work for an agency because you live and die by your clients. And so I worked really hard, and my CEO of that PR agency, I went to him very hands up and said, I'm young and agency life isn't for me. I really want to get involved in politics, not knowing what that meant at 22. And he not only helped me find the place that I'm at now, he gave our CEO a money back guarantee on me. And so that's, I share that with you, which is to say it's important that no matter where you are in your career, to find people who will mentor you and who will be your champions and continue to cultivate those relationships. In addition to being a director for Gen X, I was recently appointed to a commission for Orange County Workforce and Development. So now overseeing Obama's Workforce and Development Act for the County of Orange. And one fun thing, Art, I think you'll appreciate this. One of my former interns from USC, who I met on this panel, I'm actually going to her wedding next week. So I'm going to tie that all back to say, you know, this is the importance of developing relationships that mean something early.
That's great. Wonderful. Who's the student, if I can ask?
Catherine Graybar.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Well, give her my best. That's fantastic. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you. Daniel, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I mean, look, born and raised in LA, an LA kid, went to Loyola High School, which was a Jesuit Catholic high school where they kind of build in your social justice. That's where I really started getting involved in politics, and had really great teachers there. But where it really started taking off is when I started at USC. Oh man, I'm going to date myself now. So my freshman year, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and John Edwards were running for president. I know some of you probably were in your single digits ages, but I was set 18. And so I first started interning on a presidential campaign. I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought it was going to be like the West Wing. I was sorely mistaken. Basically, you think you're walking and talking between meetings, and what you're actually doing is copying or making phone calls or doing stuff like that. It's not very glamorous. But what I got was the bug, the campaign bug. And I got to work in California, Texas, and North Carolina for Hillary. I got to staff the former president, Bill Clinton, Hillary, Chelsea. It was a great experience. And from there, I got involved in local politics. I worked for Mayor Villaraigosa on his reelection, ran a couple campaigns for city council, including my future or then boss, Paul Corian, who was an alumni at USC. I worked with him in City Hall for 5 years doing transportation policy. Then all this, I was running campaigns on the side also while I was finishing my degree. So I finished my degree at 22 at USC while also working full-time at City Hall. And so after that, I was just doing public policy, doing transportation policy and staying involved in politics, involved in the party. Then I got a call from my former boss, and he said, Barbara Boxer is retiring. Kamala Harris is running for Senate. Do you want to go work on her campaign? And I'm like, yes. Can you tell me more? And I got to sit down with Kamala Harris. She hired me as her political director for a Senate campaign. And then we won that race, obviously, and was the Senate campaign, was the political director also the next campaign, in which I got a text message out of the blue from a person that said, hey, would love to talk to you. you did a great job on Kamala's campaign. Would love to get you involved in my campaign. I'm like, okay, great. Who is this? And the person said, it's Gavin. And I said, Gavin who? And he said, Gavin Newsom. And I'm like, which of my friends is fucking with me? And he's like, no, this is actually Gavin Newsom. And I was mortified, so embarrassed. Anyways, I got to, once we figured that out, I was his political director on that gubernatorial campaign. And since then, I've been running local campaigns. And obviously, in this cycle, I'm going to be super involved in redistricting. But, it's about just, building relationships. One of my interns on Gavin's campaign went to go work on Kamala's presidential. And now she works as the assistant to the political director in the White House, Rachel Chu. And a USC alumni, someone that took our class, took the political science 395. So, what Kamala once told me is, if you're going to get through that door, don't be the last one. And I think that's really important to talk to folks about. Once you get involved, make sure you take the next generation.
Great, great comments. Danya.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm sorry that I have to leave early. I actually started a new job this past week. And so awesome. Thank you. I'm working in Virginia as the campaigns director for the Virginia House Democratic Caucus. So I'm basically drinking through a fire hose right now, getting all caught up with everything that's going on. But excited to be here. I never in a million years thought I would work on campaigns. I didn't even know that you could do that and get paid to do it. I came from a very apolitical family, born and raised in California, went to USC, and actually decided that I wanted to work in politics in the middle of USC. And so I kind of switched my major and switched gears like my sophomore year of college. And so essentially, I knew absolutely nobody in the industry. I had no idea what it even meant to work in politics, but pretty much after I switched gears, spent the rest of my time at USC chasing college internships at consulting firms. I did the DC Dornsife program, which I absolutely loved. So did a lot of networking out in DC, and through all of those relationships that I built from a variety of different internships is how I landed my first job, which was managing a state senate race out in Eastern Iowa. So a week after I graduated in 2018, I moved to a place called Clinton, Iowa, which was a culture shock for just about everybody involved, which is definitely a really interesting experience. But worked with the Iowa Senate out in Eastern Iowa, ended up running their paid comms program with a caucus for 9 target races across the state. I came back home for what they call in campaigns is fun employment, which if you want to do campaign work, I'm happy to kind of be a sounding board as to how to deal with that, because it happens quite often, unfortunately. But I ended up going back to Iowa very last minute to help run a special election that lasted 3.5 weeks, which was probably the weirdest state ledge race I'd ever worked on, since it was right in the middle of Iowa caucus madness. So while we were running a state ledge race, everyone and their mother who was running for president wanted to do an event with us, because of course you can't write anything better than that. And so a month after that wrapped up, I joined Better O'Rourke's presidential campaign, still out in Iowa in his press shop. Stayed with him up until November when he dropped out. And this past year, I moved to Texas, I believe about a month before the pandemic hit, and began to manage Representative Allred's reelection campaign, one of the most competitive frontline congressionals in the country, which was a really interesting experience to do that completely virtually in Texas, which I had just moved to. But that's kind of what I've been up to for the past few years since I've graduated. And I can attest to everything that's been said already, that the relationships that you build over time is really kind of the bread and butter of this industry and how you kind of get far. And a lot of folks are actually really willing to help. The only reason I'm here today is because of all the people who I begged to get coffee with me for 20 minutes to hear me out, and who gave advice to me, did so. And so I'm excited to kind of do the same for you all. And even though I'm leaving early, I think they're going to be passing around my personal email. You are all free to use it. Don't be shy. Happy to do one-on-ones as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Danya. That's wonderful. Maddie.
Thanks. And Danya, just hearing your background and experience, I'm positive we know so many of the same people. I'm surprised we haven't met before. But my name is Maddie. I graduated from USC in 2013. Unlike some other folks who work in politics, I actually didn't grow up wanting to work in politics. I was always very passionate about certain issues, but I didn't really care who, you know, when I was in high school, like who was the Speaker of the House and that kind of stuff. But I did USC's semester in Washington program and I loved it. I fell in love with the city, fell in love with politics, got to make a lot of really great connections with folks and build my network as they told me to do, which was really kind of scary at first because I didn't really understand what that meant. And I learned it meant just be nice to people and get coffee and reach out. I moved back to DC after I graduated and had a couple internships. I got through a USC connection, actually, I got a press internship in Barbara Boxer's Senate office. Through there, I started applying to staff assistant, press assistant, entry-level jobs on the Hill. You know, got coffee with anyone who would, like Danya said, take, you know, 10, 15 minutes, and ended up getting a press assistant job for Senator Mark Warner from Virginia. And I'm sure we'll get into this more, but if there's one piece of advice I'll give to folks is when it comes to working in DC and in politics, definitely get a lot of advice, but also take people's advice with a grain of salt. Because a lot of people told me, like, you can't work, like, there's no way you can work for someone from a state where you don't have any connections, or if you didn't intern in that office. And after a month of interning, I got a job as a press assistant for Senator Mark Warner. Folks told me, you know, you have to be a staff assistant for 1 to 2 years before a press assistant. So that would be my takeaway. But anyways, I worked for Mark Warner for 2.5 years doing press and communications. I then left to run my own comm shop at an advocacy organization called Engage Cuba, which was working to lift the embargo. We were doing a ton of really great work. Unfortunately, when the Trump administration came in and kind of shut things down, there wasn't as much for us to do on the legislative front. So I decided to give up mojitos in Havana, Cuba for pizza campaign shop, which people thought I was crazy. I then went to work on a Maryland governor's race as a communications director. My boss, who was fantastic, unfortunately lost in the primary. And it was July of 2018. I was trying to figure out what to do. And I decided, you know what, my lease is up. I sent my resume to the DCCC, and they said that a congressional race in Iowa needed a comms director. And within a week, I packed my bags and moved to Des Moines, Iowa. And I worked for Cindy Axney, who was running, and also a frontline, she's in the same class as Colin Allred, a frontline district. And we flipped a Republican seat, stayed on working with her on the House side as her deputy chief of staff and communications director for about a year before I transitioned back to the Senate, where I now work for Patty Murray, who is the chair of the HELP committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. So yeah, I also am so grateful. When I first moved here, I really didn't know a ton of people. You know, my family wasn't super politically involved, and the people were so kind to me and just got coffee and looked at my resume and looked at my writing samples. So I'm always happy to do the same for folks as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Maddie, and thank you to all our panelists. I want to start off with Danya a little bit, just because I know we're a little short on time with you. And you mentioned something that resonated with me, which was this idea that when you work on campaigns, that is a part-time job. Well, it's a full-time job with a part-time tenure. You know, you never are in one position for too long. Can you talk about what that world is like? Because I think a lot of students coming out of college think, you know what, I might jump on a campaign. It'll be great. And maybe you're there for a while, but we know those campaigns are going to end, and maybe they'll be successful and maybe they won't. What's that living with that insecurity like? If you could talk for a few minutes about that.
Totally. And I think this is something that I, quite honestly, like, when I told folks that I was going to work on a campaign, everyone was like, just get a job and everything will work out. And no one actually talked to me about what happens after you lose your job essentially overnight. So yeah, typically campaigns are very, very full-time up until election day. And sometimes primary day for whatever reason you're in a primary. And then you essentially do what they call fun employment, which is basically you are unemployed and you are kind of working to get on the next campaign. And that period of time is pretty much undefined. And the reality is it really just depends on what time of the year you are in between campaigns. Can dictate whether that's a couple weeks, whether that's a couple months, whether that's a few months. And so I think my advice to anybody who wants to do campaign work or at least be on the campaign trail for a little bit is I think financial management is something that like we often don't really talk about, but is like huge. You can actually like getting a financial advisor, making sure you're saving up money. And then when you're on a campaign, taking advantage of the opportunities to network and to think through professional development. I think folks are usually really, really helpful once the campaign is over to help folks kind of get placed and be in a good spot right away. It's just a matter of the fact that that time is really undefined. And so there are support systems. Make sure you use them. Make sure you ask questions, ask for help. And so I'm happy to talk any specific questions if anyone has about what's it like to be unemployed. Since I graduated, I've been in between campaigns or unemployed, I think almost 4 or 5 times, all in various.
Do you get used to it?
You know, existential crises continue to occur regardless. So that's definitely something real. You go on a lot of walks in the park to feel something for sure. That being said, they become easier to navigate over time. Now, when I'm unemployed, I know what I'm supposed to do, which is go back and tap into my network, have conversations, informational interviews, so I can set myself up for success. And I think there's a little bit of learning curve, and I'm happy to kind of offer any information I can to make that curve less steep.
Good, I appreciate that. Daniel, I mean, I know you've operated from office to office over a period of time. Do you ever sort of chart a path for you, or is it more or less you take what's in front of you and you move to the next opportunity when it's the right time to do that? Is it possible to sort of organize or create a career path that one's able to follow in politics, or maybe politics doesn't operate that way?
I mean, it depends. It depends on what you want to do. There's 2 pathways, I think, in politics. One, if you want to run for office, that's one pathway. And the folks that want to run for office, they have their own trajectory, and you can be involved in campaigns, but eventually you're going to have to go back to where you want to run and work the community. That's why staying in the state you're probably going to run for is really important. If you don't want to run for office, that's a whole different path. You're more flexible. You can go to the East Coast or Texas or New Mexico or Ohio or stuff like that. But I think you can chart it out. I think for sure. I mean, I think for the most part, that's something that I wanted to do from a very young age. I think I worked on presidentials. I checked that off my list. I wanted to work on a gubernatorial. I checked that off my list. I worked on a Senate campaign. I checked that off my list. I think, look, if there's a will, I think there's a way. You just have to be willing to make sacrifices. When everyone else is hanging out with their friends and hanging out, you're out in a campaign office grinding, or you're at a community meeting grinding. It really is not for the faint of heart. If you're going to be in, you have to eat, sleep, and drink this. That's the only way I know how to do it. It's to go full speed. I'm sure there's other ways. There's people that probably have better work-life balances. I haven't met them, but they exist out there ostensibly. But I think what you have to really do is you have to sit down and actually chart yourself out, because if you don't do that, I think you can sometimes I think it's really important to be picky. Don't take the first campaign that comes your way, because I think, for me, I mean, look, I've stayed in California. A lot of people are like, why aren't you going to DC, blah, blah, blah. No interest. For me, I grew up an LA kid. I'm Mexican. I can't function above 60 degrees. I cannot do DC winters. I can't do shitty Mexican food outside of Los Angeles. So So for me, it's very different. So I'm very strategic about what I would do. But it really depends on what you want to do. If your dream is to work on the Hill, go work on a congressional campaign or a state rep campaign out in one of these red debut seats. For me, it was not a priority, but for folks, I get it. It just kind of depends on where you want to go, and you have to chart it.
Right. Natalie, I wonder if you could comment, because you've taken a different career path from sort of campaigns and that sort of tact. I mean, what was your thought process when you were a college student coming out and you know, pursuing politics, but interestingly, a different path?
Yeah. So my expertise and my experience has been in within the political action committee. So one, managing, operating, and scaling political action committee. So working with the candidates and electeds themselves, and also working on the donor side. So I think, I don't know, I think the beauty of my stories, it's kind of one of those things where I had that burning and desire, but I didn't necessarily have the blueprint in front of me to know, okay, you know, if I want to get involved in politics, I must do a campaign. I kind of just fell into the fundraising and the PAC based off of who I knew, where I was, and where my strengths were. So I don't remember which panelist it was that said this in the beginning, but I do think there's something to be said for leaning in and taking as many informational meetings with people as you can at a time, just to begin to understand what types of opportunities are available to you. And I mean, even at my still relatively young age and thinking about what my next move is professionally, I am still in awe at the different types of positions that are available that kind of cross the section without necessarily working for a candidate directly, working with NGOs, think tanks, other nonprofits, PACs, all sorts of things.
Wow, great comments. Maddie, I wonder if you could talk a little bit. It wasn't too long ago that you were on the same side as our students here. I wonder if you could talk about any of the resources or strategies you had coming out of college, or maybe the year or two prior to coming out. What do you think really helped separate you out from this amazing job that you're enjoying out in DC, plus or minus the Mexican food out there, it sounds like?
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah, I mean, I did the semester in DC program, and I feel terrible. I'm totally blanking on
Dornsife DC.
Woman, what?
With the Dornsife DC program?
Yeah, but who's the woman who like ran it, sort of?
Oh gosh, I only know Jeff Fields in our office is he might have been out there when you were there, but to be honest, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I'm blanking. She was kind of like our DC mama bear out there. She was great. I think some advice I would give is it was honestly very scary moving out here. I didn't have a job. You know, I was very fortunate that my parents were able to, and privileged that my parents were able to help me out. But here's one piece of advice: after you graduate, taking an unpaid internship sucks. Like, I get it. It's not ideal. You're going to have friends that are going to make, you know, 6 figures out of USC, and it's not going to feel great. However, it was really helpful for me to get my foot in the door, to get that unpaid internship. And I understand, like, financially, it's not an option for everyone. So I totally get that. And there are other opportunities. And I was very privileged and fortunate. But, you know, if you can swing it, you know, get in a group house, pay, you know, super cheap rent, get a bartending job. I worked at a whiskey bar called Jack Rose, and, you know, I was at my internship at 8:30 and then was at the bar closing at 3 a.m. So it was super long days, but it was fun. And I was, you know, 22. And it really allowed me to start meeting people. And because again, I really didn't know too many people who worked in politics. And at the time, most of the folks that I knew from USC and from Pasadena, where I'm from, were on the other side of the aisle for me, which was not as helpful. And so having that internship was really helpful. And actually it allowed me to get my first job because I got lunch with a friend that I knew through another friend, and she brought along one of her friends who happened to work for Mark Warner. And she at the time we had never met, and I saw the press assistant job in Mark Warner's office, and I sent her an email and was like, hey, if you think I might be a good fit, will you pass my resume along? And there was some sort of mix up, and they thought that I was best friends with this person who happens to be my best friend now. So they were like, oh, well, we'll give her a courtesy phone interview. And because she's really good friends with this person. And I ended up, they're like, we're not going to hire her. She doesn't have enough experience. And I ended up getting the job. On my first day, they're like, oh, your friend started. She was like, who? But anyways, it was definitely like having that internship, like just getting my foot in the door, like literally being at lunch that day allowed me to meet that person and work in Mark Warner. So when I first started applying for jobs, folks would tell me it's all about light and time, which is super not helpful advice. So I realized like, okay, well, you have to put yourself in a situation that lends itself to light and timing. And by that, I mean, meet as many people as you can. Have them, when you meet them, say, I'm really interested in healthcare policy. Do you have any friends that work in healthcare, or I'm really interested in communications? And now that I'm on meeting with a lot of younger folks and interns, it's helpful, for me when they make my job easier. Because like, I'm really interested in this. Like, I want to do communications. Or I'm from Iowa, or I'm from Texas. So like, oh, I have a friend that's in this office, or I have a friend that's in that office, or I know someone in this campaign. So just be, obviously being courteous is people's time, but don't be afraid to just reach out to folks and say, hey, do you have a few minutes? Can you introduce me to someone? And always have an ask, and just follow up with folks and say, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And that was kind of long-winded, but that would be my
good. Thank you. It seems like we're getting a little feedback here, so I know we're working on it to clean it up. So hopefully it'll get cleaned up here in just a bit. Natalie.
Oh, that feedback. Can you guys hear me okay?
What was that?
Could you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. I was gonna say, I'll just put it in the chat otherwise. To piggyback off of Maddie's comment, when asking for an introduction, one thing that I always do is I will go and maybe stalk that person's LinkedIn to see who they know that I might want to meet. And then when I present it to whoever I'm talking to, I always kind of have two thoughts in mind. What's my minimum acceptable outcome, and what's my desired outcome? So in my perfect world, I'll say, I would love to meet this person, but if you don't know them, you have someone better in mind, you're comfortable with another intro, could you introduce me to someone like this? So there's always two asks that make it easier for, whoever it is that's trying to help you. Great
words of wisdom. Daniel, how about any thoughts or recommendations for a young college student who's going to be coming out and being a graduate and getting involved? What's the best avenue to sort of bridge that first gap, which is certainly hard to find that first job?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, it kind of like going back to what I said, you have to figure out what you want to do. If you want to work on campaigns, I always say the best way to get involved is to get involved on a local race, a local city council, a local school board race. Look, these races aren't sexy, but I'll tell you what, I'll hire someone that ran an El Monte city council race over someone that worked for the Joe Biden campaign as a field organizer. Because at the end of the day, if you show that you can run a campaign that doesn't have any attention, that has no sex appeal, and that you have to do it all yourself, that shows that you have some skill sets. And that's how you build networks. Look, the folks that rise in this industry are people that have the fundamentals. It's like anything, sports, music, stuff like that, you have to get the fundamentals right. You got to walk before you can run. And so learning that, like on a campaign, is learning that one of my first jobs was knocking on doors every day on a city council race. I got paid like $300 a week, which is like nothing. And
that's unemployment.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I didn't know. I was like 20. I had no idea. I was like, I'm getting paid on the campaign, so like this is the success. But you know, you knock on these doors and you talk to folks. You're able to formulate a conversation on the fly. Knocking on canvassing doors, I learned more about politics knocking on doors every day for 5 hours a day than any other job I've done in politics. So the important thing is to get your foot in the door. That's the most important thing. And it doesn't have to be like, you know, you're the research director on a targeted congressional. There's a lot of campaigns out here, especially here in California. Take advantage of it while you're here at USC. There are 10 million people in LA County. That's the 11th largest state. If you take it out of the state, you have city councils in LA that are larger than state house races in most states. Long Beach, which is the second largest city in LA County, is 500,000 people. That's larger than New Orleans and Atlanta. These campaigns need to be run, and they need to be run by someone. And if you're hungry and you go in, like you're gonna rise to the top. So be on the lookout for these. You have to be a self-starter, and you have to be willing to introduce yourself to folks. Cold calls, stuff like that. People respect hustle. That's the one thing that I've learned in politics is if someone managed to get my email or contact number out of somewhere, that means they're hustling. And so I'll sit down with that person just because I respect the hustle. And I think a lot of people in politics have similar views.
Great. Maddie, what's the one thing you wish you know now? Well, what's the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were graduating that maybe would have made your life a little bit easier to sort of circumvent your way through the process?
Is my audio working better?
You know, we still got a little bit of feedback.
Shoot. Okay, I think I'm gonna try calling in if you want to go to someone else. And then
Okay, that's fine. Let me pass this off to, no, that's okay.
Okay.
Natalie, how about you? Natalie, you there?
Yeah,
you're pondering, sorry.
Yeah, two quick answers. One, and this I think is transferable for any place that you work. One, work is never finished at the end of the day. So get really comfortable with the fact that like you might not have a clean inbox every day, and be at peace with that. And then the second thing is really that you don't have to have it all figured out. I remember my senior year of college, I probably called my mom once a week, just in tears. And she would just say, yeah, well, that's because your whole life has always been planned up until the point that you go to college. And now you're just realizing that you get to make your own choices. And so I think the sooner I was able to just release myself of the burden of feeling like I had to have everything figured out, the better off I was.
Yeah, I think the last point you made is pretty salient, that I think sometimes we always think we have to know the exact path we're going to follow. And certainly, things can change over time, and you just sort of roll with those punches. So I want to leave enough time for questions from the students. So any questions that we can offer up to our panelists from our students that are here tonight? We've got people from really diverse backgrounds. Let's take advantage of that and answer any questions that we have. So just go ahead and raise your virtual hand if you have a question. Yes, Elodie.
Yeah, hi. So my question is about like what you do if you get a political job, but then feel like you're not developing a lot of like really useful skills. So like right now, my internship, I like the people I work for and it's fun. but I am doing a lot of sort of like typical intern stuff, right? Like copying and whatever. And I feel like I'm not necessarily gaining like, yeah, a lot of skills that would be transferable to something like working on a campaign. Is there like, what do you do when you find yourself in that position?
Would like to take a whack
I
at
can.
that.
Does this
Go ahead.
work if I'm on my audio?
Yeah, actually it does. Thank you, Maddie. It sounds good.
Yeah, sorry about that. One piece of advice I would give you there is internships are frustrating. But I will say this, you know, it's always going to be a little bit of grunt work, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be a meaningful experience for you. I use internship, like just ask a ton of questions. If you're not learning because you're not, you know, necessarily writing the policy memo or writing the speech, you can sit in the room and listen to those conversations. You know, that just absorb as much as you can in those experiences, and ask for more. But I think it's really important to make sure that, you know, do the job, do the internship job and responsibilities really, really well. And the stuff that is, you're like rolling your eyes at, like, oh my gosh, like, do I need a college degree to do this? And it's frustrating and annoying, but it's so surprising how like sometimes people still just don't do that stuff well, or they don't care about it. And I think for me, like, if someone doesn't care about doing those more menial tasks and doing them well, then why, you know, am I going to want to give them more responsibilities? And that's not to suggest that you weren't doing them well at all, of course. So I'd say do the small stuff really well, and then it's very likely that they'll give you more on your plate. That's what we, you know, when our interns, you know, for example, last week, our intern did a really great job sending us a memo, a readout from a briefing that she went to. So we sent her to another briefing and had her write up a full memo that she sent to the chief of staff, the staff director, and our entire education team. And that's not, you know, it's not normal that an intern is emailing, you know, our chief of staff. And because she did such a good job on the other stuff, we were like, wow, like, she really cares. She's putting in the time. Let's give her more. She'll ask us questions. And the other thing I would say is, like, I had an internship once where someone came up to me and they're like, Maddie, I'm so sorry. Can you shred these papers? Like, normally we have, you know, I know you're a press intern and normally we have the other interns do it, but like, do you mind doing this? And I was like, yeah, no problem. And she was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, no big deal. And then the press assistant overheard me and he was like, all right, like, that was awesome that you did that. Like, you didn't have an attitude. And I was like, that's so surprising. Like, people have an attitude with that. And he was like, Maddie, you would be surprised. So I think just, like, you know, do the menial stuff really well and, you know, absorb as much information as you can and just ask to be involved in more stuff, would be my advice.
Yeah. And I would say good communication, right? It's, I'm sure, Natalie, you work with a lot of people and you probably like open lines of communication, and that's the best way to sort of resolve any sort of issues within an office.
Can I, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna like.
No, go.
Okay, how about Natalie first and then Daniel. Go ahead, Natalie.
Oh no, I was just going to echo what you said and add that regardless of internship or not, I think if you're working in any political job, you have to be ready to scrub toilets. And I scrub them next to my CEO with a smile on my face. So
yeah, that
ethic should never go away.
Yeah, I agree. Daniel.
So I guess I kind of have a kind of a different view on this. Look, I've come from a family that's not politically involved, single-head household, Latino. I don't have family in politics. I know a lot of my friends that are in politics that are brown, black, or Asian can't take internships forever. You know, there's just an economic component of this. If you feel like you're not growing, then like you need to get out of there. Like you're gonna come to resent it. There's important stuff that like what everyone said was right. If you are learning and you're enjoying it, for sure, but don't end up just doing a job just to do it. Like the best time to, you know what they say, the best time to look for a job is when you currently have a job. You know, if you aren't feeling fulfilled in your internship, go look for another one and use that experience to parlay it into another one. what I don't want is for people just to go keep grinding and put a smile on their face, but like they end up resenting politics, or they see the bad portions of what politics is. And there's a lot of good stuff. It's just sometimes there's a lot of crappy stuff in the beginning. So I think you have to continually growing. If you feel like you aren't growing, then maybe you need to reevaluate things. I think if you're at an internship longer than a year or half a year, you have to really think about moving on, honestly, for your own edification and for your own like career development.
Right, good. Sydney, I see your hand up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your certainly busy schedules to chat with us. My name's Sydney. I think my question might be best suited for Maddie, but anyone, Daniel, Natalie, if you guys have interns during the Zoom era, then absolutely jump in. I would love to hear everyone's opinion. I'm currently an intern on Capitol Hill, and staffers are, of course, incredibly busy. Right now, I'm mostly remote, and I'm having trouble. Like, the number one thing people say about intern on Capitol Hill is like making those connections. I'm having trouble building what I would consider strong-ish relationships due to the Zoom era, and I'm getting like great projects. It's all very interesting. But Maddie, if you could talk a little bit about either like what you've seen in your interns or what your office is doing to help facilitate those relationships that are networking, as well as, you know, getting interesting projects at work, I would really appreciate it.
Oh, phone. Nope, we still can't hear you. There we go.
Now? Okay.
Now we got you.
Great. I'm not echoing.
Welcome to a COVID world, right? We just rolled
Yeah,
the punches.
and I don't do the tech in our office, if that wasn't clear. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I imagine that is super hard right now, Sydney. Number one, I would say, like, definitely feel free to get my contact information and reach out to me. But it's tough. I mean, I have had a harder time developing relationships with some of our interns because of this. So I completely get it from your perspective. And I don't think you're even remotely like the only person in this situation. I think for you, people are busy, but like they also have time, and like you are working for them for free, or maybe you have a stipend, but like people can make 10 minutes. I think sometimes it's people don't want to intentionally not be helpful. It's just with 1,000 things going on and not seeing interns, in person, it's hard. I mean, admittedly, like I forget sometimes to like reach out to our interns and grab, coffee with them. So just, shoot them a note. And I think, try to be like right now during recess, like this is a really great time for the next 2 weeks. Obviously things have been totally insane the past couple months. But just like shoot people a note. Hey, I know you're super busy. Do you have 10, 15 minutes to get on the phone? I'd love to learn, how you got to where you are, or I'm really interested in this specific policy area, or I did this project or went to this briefing, and like talk to the LCs, talk to the LAs, like just shoot people a note and just be a little more proactive about it than you normally have to be. And I mean, the worst that's going to happen is someone's going to say, I don't have time. And like, that's probably not a great person for you to spend your time with anyways, if they're not going to be helpful to you. And the other thing I would say too is talk to are you on the House or the Senate side?
I'm in the House, but I'm in a leadership office.
Oh, great. Talk to whoever does your admin or your internship coordinating and be like, hey, like a friend of mine in another office, they did a brown bag with some of the more senior members. Like, is that something we could do? Or like, just like sometimes people are like, oh, that's a really great idea, and just try to be a little more proactive, and you're not going to be annoying. It's just hard. I think, especially with folks that are parents and, having to do childcare and this and that, it's like, it might not be on their top of mind. So just be a little more proactive about it than normal.
Natalie, maybe you could comment a little bit about life in COVID with you. You were just talking how you just went out on the road for the first time in a while.
It's interesting. That question, Sydney, is a really good one. I just spent a month in DC and I was living in Admo, so I know Jack Rose. And I was talking to one of my members he's in I forgot what publication, but top 100 lobbyists in the country. And I asked him the same question and he said, if I didn't have 20 years of experience here, I'd have a really hard time. It is really hard for people who are entry level and up and coming. And so I think another thing to maybe consider too, if you are out there, is where are the places that you're getting coffee, where people are, and try to meet people organically that way. And also maybe consider, if you're working with a leadership office, talk to your internship coordinator and see what kind of opportunity there is to meet with interns in other offices virtually. So for us, we did our entire internship experience, it still is remote. And one of my USC interns built the curriculum with me and is now executing it with my oversight, which has been really awesome. And so what we did to help our interns build their network and relationships within the organization is I actually had them build out like a, maybe like a content series. So I had them each write down a topic of something that they wanted to learn. And then we did an interview with our intern team and our CEO one week. And then the next week it was our chief communications officer. Because for us, it is really important that they're not just getting the work experience, but they're getting the opportunity for mentorship and the FaceTime and all of those types of all of those types of things that you might get if you were normally in an office.
Great. Daniel, any thoughts about life in the world of COVID? Hopefully it's going away, right?
I mean, yeah, look, what Maddie and Natalie said are, I think, pretty much on point. I think that this is a snapshot in time. I think things are going to start returning to normal, it seems. So just hold on for a little bit longer. I know it's really shitty, but I mean, I can only feel for you guys in school your senior year, and you've lost most of your senior year. So
it certainly is tough, but we see the future is almost upon us. So fingers crossed. Allison, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you so much for talking to us today. I was wondering how, as a young person interning in an office with a lot of older people working there, that you could like make connections with people, because I'm working at the DA's office right now and I'm the only intern there. So I'm the youngest person in the office by like 10 years. And I feel like I'm having trouble relating to some people because just generationally, I can't really go out with people after work or anything. And I was just wondering if there's any ways to deal with that.
Wants to take a swipe at that. A little bit of what we've talked about, but
because you're in the DA's office, I actually know a couple people there that I'm happy to connect you with. They're on the younger side. Look, I think it depends on where you are in the DA's office. My friend Joseph Ineguez, I don't know if you know him, is the special deputy to or senior deputy to Gascon, and he's 36, so a little bit closer to your age. It's about like scoping folks out, find folks that are near your generation, or the USC network, especially in LA, is huge. There's a ton of deputy DAs, DAGs, deputy AGs that are out there that are SC alumni, and that USC alumni network in Los Angeles is unbeatable. There's not anything that's even close. It's like USC, then like some of the Ivies, and UCLA is like way all the way down here. So that's what I would say is like, and also hit up the people that are older than you. They're to have an informational interview or have lunch to like ask them how they got involved. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and you have to be willing to kind of like throw caution to the wind on some of these things and just ask people, be precocious. If people have a problem, they'll let you know, but nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Natalie, any thoughts on
the one thing? Oh, I'm sorry.
Or Maddie, go ahead.
I'll go after Maddie.
I was just gonna say, Allison, I've totally been there, and it can be a little awkward for sure. Two things I would say: people love talking about their kids. People love talking about themselves. So if you ask someone about their kids, they will probably go on forever. No, but in all seriousness, one piece of advice I got when I first moved here is people love to talk about themselves, which is true. So just ask someone like, hey, how long have you been working here? You know, or what were you doing before this? And just those random questions, and then start to develop, you know, I think for some people they can connect on sports. It's not really my thing. But just like, hey, do you have 10 minutes to, you know, where I can find out how you got to where you are, that kind of stuff. Or just go back to their kids. That'll be my advice.
Very good. Natalie, final word for the night.
Yeah, thank you. I'll make it brief. So one, I think when you're looking at older people, right? It's okay to think I might not have a lot to share. I might not have a lot in common. When I evaluate people like that for my own relationship building, if they're not someone that I would view as a peer, my thought is, okay, maybe they could become an advisor in some capacity, right? They're a mentor. Maybe they're someone that is secretly on my personal board of directors that I want to call when I need advice for things professionally. And so if I put them in that advisor type mentality, I'll ask questions and just be curious, just really lean in to curiosity about their life, as we've heard, you know, where they got where they are, and just start to build a rapport. And then when you have the questions about work and you have the bigger things that you need, it's much easier to pick up the phone.
Yeah. And I just did that line. I mean, I worked as a state prosecutor for 10 years, so I know what it's like to be in a big, huge bureaucracy. I think lawyers, like everyone, are very busy. It's finding the right time to chat with them about these things. And when you can sort of gauge, hey, they're not too busy, maybe, you know, that's when you can start to build those connections. But, you know, you're there to learn. You're a sponge. And I think if they know that, then they're probably going to be pretty accessible to chatting with you, at least on areas that they're interested in. I think I couldn't emphasize what Maddie said enough. People love to talk about themselves. So start there, and then, you know, then you'll build the relationships from there.